Hello, Tar Heel Nation. I'm back. UNC Hoops Talk podcast here. I'm your host, Dan DeWitt, and I think maybe first time all season. Am I right? We got Gil here back. For the people that have been watching the podcast longer than this season, I think. Gil, am I right? This first time this season you're on the podcast?
Second
Second
time, I
one.
believe.
All
Yeah.
right. I think now that you say that, I do remember that. Kind of a random one in the middle of the season or so. Popped on and kind of towards the end a little bit, right?
Yep. Somewhere there in the middle. Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, obviously, not on the best of terms. If you listen to the last podcast, I kind of mentioned this would be kind of my opportunity to podcast the last time during the ACC tournament anyway, because early Saturday morning I leave for a week in Puerto Rico. It's looking a little bit better now that we kind of feel like the Tar Heels are out of the tournament. I don't feel like I'm going to be missing as much, but still kind of stinks to miss some of those championship games Saturday, Sunday, and the first couple of rounds of the tournament will be hard to watch. But that's not really why we're here. We're gonna, I don't know, therapy session it again or something about the Tar Heels. Looked really good against Boston College last night. Threes were going down. Offense looked good. Sharing the ball, lots of assists. Um, and then we kind of run into Virginia tonight, which I think everybody knew it would be a tough one, but I think people had kind of gotten their hopes up again a little bit. And I mean, RJ Davis at least played really well tonight. Baycott pretty limited, pretty gimpy out there. Obviously hurts us, and it just never really seemed to get in a flow. Besides RJ Davis, there was not much offense there. Some very untimely turnovers, missed free throws, all kinds of stuff in there. So, Gil, I'm going to kind of open it up to you. Obviously, we got the ACC tournament here, but you haven't been on a lot of the season. We can go season at a whole. We'll jump into some comments here. We got 300 us joining us already. He says, "Turn out the lights. The party's over." They say all good things must come to an end. So he's looking towards next season already. But
It
what do you
was an
got, Gil?
appro- it was an appropriate punctuation to the season, to be quite honest. It was kind of fitting that they just couldn't get the job done. I texted you a few weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, I guess, and said, they beat the teams that they should beat and can't seem to beat the teams that, are above them in the standings that are
That
tough
we need to
games.
beat.
That they need to beat, yeah, and they're capable of beating, as we know from last season. But this team, to me, it's really hard to sum it up. But it just looked like they played with a weight. I mean, a few weeks ago, I know there was that story about Hubert Davis having them play with a weighted vest, but that was just how they played all season. Like they had this added pressure on them. They all came back with one goal in mind. Obviously, didn't live up to the expectations, which were extremely lofty, and they just felt like they played with this added pressure. My wife said watching the game tonight, like they just didn't look like they were out there having fun and like playing free like she sees some of these other teams. And I think that's about as good as I could sum it up. They just didn't execute in close ball games, and I don't know. It's funny that they were able to seal the deal in games that they had to have last year to get into the tournament and then make that deep run. Seemed like all the details and winning plays they were making them last year, and this year just the exact opposite. Uh,
Yeah,
it's it's
it looked like that, and they kind of react to how they're playing instead of trying to play off of how like you said, go out and have fun, and then your play kind of follow that. It's more of like last night. You know, Obviously we see the video of Caleb jumping up and down as the late three by the walk on, and they just looked like they were free and having fun. And tonight, when they just can't get it going, it's kind of backwards. Instead of like you said, going out and having fun and then letting your game kind of follow that, it's whatever our game is doing that night, our mood or attitude, our body language is going to follow along with that. So yeah, it's a
it's
tough one.
surreal right now because all of us that are true fans, and everybody on here is part of that, great Carolina family and loves the Tar Heels. It's surreal because we know it's the end of the run for a player like Leaky Black, who, ends his career as the player with the most all-time games at North Carolina, and there's so much unknown going forward. We obviously don't have to unpack all that here tonight, but we just don't even know. It's the last game in Carolina blue for Pete Nance. Well, we don't know. They make it mix up an NIT bid. We don't know. Sorry, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but
Yeah, no,
um,
so I put it in the live chat if you're watching on YouTube. I put in the chat, should UNC play or accept a bid to the NIT if I'm assuming they would get an invite because I think the qualification is you're over 500. We're over 500 with our record. And I'm sure the NIT would like a name like UNC in it. So I'm sure they'll get an invite. But should we accept an invite to the NIT? So we'll let some comments come if people answer that. But it makes me think how much more we maybe need to appreciate the 17 run because those guys did it. They came back so hungry after losing in the championship. And I don't know what's worse. Obviously, 16. We lose at the buzzer, all time classic, just kind of big time letdown. But last year, up 15 at half and just kind of collapse and like, I still hardly I sometimes I forget that they only lost by 3, like, it seems like they lost, such a big lead that we just lost that game kinda big and kinda really didn't have a chance in the second half, but they only lost by 3. Um,
oh yeah, it was a rebound away, a stop
right.
away. Yeah,
And so, yeah, so 17 to come back, I know it gets kinda put below '09 and, '05 and stuff talent-wise and stuff, but for those guys to come back that hungry, to be able to make that run, we probably don't appreciate it like we probably should, and we just kinda expected this one to do the same, right? And the guys came back and said, "This is why we're coming back. It's for March," and, we were waiting for that flip to switch all season long and kinda waiting and waiting and waiting, and I think a lot of us kind of saw that maybe it wasn't going to happen, halfway, three-fourths, whatever it may be through the season. Obviously, the media started, picking up on it and talking about it quite a bit. Um, and yeah, you kind of saw the writing on the wall, but we still had the hope of last year. And like you said, very surreal right now. That is that really the end? I even had a friend text me today and like, "Hey, they got a big game tonight." And I said, "Well, they got 3 more." And they're like, "Oh, I think they're
yeah.
in if they win tonight." And like, again, I'm trying to keep my hopes and my expectations kind of level-headed, but I got people trying to talk me into if they beat Virginia tonight, we're going to be in the tournament. And um, you know,
I think they had a legitimate shot at being in the tournament if they won tonight. That's maybe just a personal opinion, but I feel like the bubble is a little bit weak, and I feel like, yeah, the brand of North Carolina would have been something that the selection committee would have tried to put in if there was a decent enough resume. But that's all speculation now. They lost the game when it was like a must win. You just were waiting for that urgency, and it showed up a little bit too late, not enough.
and
Um,
like you said, that kind of wraps up the season because I feel like that's how it's been. There's like Wake Forest, we're getting blown out, and all of a sudden we start hitting threes at the end, and just kind of make it close enough to look like we were in it, even though we were kind of never in the, like the desperation just sets in a little bit too late. We start, throwing up these threes and making them, and the desperation's there, but it's like too little, too late, and that's kind of the season as a whole is, um, yeah,
I thought Virginia was definitely a beatable team, and they were without a starter
right.
that gave us fits the first time we saw them in Charlottesville. And the way that the ACC tournament bracket lined up, that Carolina had beaten every team on their half, with the exception of Virginia Tech, who was already eliminated at this stage. So, I'm like you. I had a little bit of hope, even though I wasn't letting my expectations get too crazy. But you thought this is the last chance. They're gonna make something happen, and I don't know. It just didn't feel like Carolina basketball much
Yeah.
of the season. And I don't know how much of that was like style of play or just the way the season panned out because there was that COVID year where Carolina lost by I don't know how many buzzer beaters and how many close games. I mean, this was similar in a lot of ways that we lost a lot of close games. The majority of our losses were under 6 points or whatever, average margin of defeat somewhere around 6 points. But I don't know, style of play, too much walking the ball up the court, not enough pushing and looking for those transition opportunities. I mean, the few opportunities tonight, like when Caleb would roll off the screen and he fed, Pete Nance with like a bullet pass as he rolled to the basket. Like that's what you got to do against a team like UVA. Make it easier on yourself because their defense is so, stifling and just
Right.
didn't see enough of that from this team throughout the season. I want to see, of course, I want to see a team that wins games, but personally, I'm not a fan of UVA's brand of basketball, and I would rather see a team. Historically, North Carolina basketball is getting up and down the court, averaging 80 points or so, up 70s at the very least per game, getting in transition, fast break points, exciting basketball. I mean, someone tweeted today after I think it was a post of a Vince Carter dunk from I forget what season that was in the ACC tournament. It was circulating around Twitter. I was actually at that game in Greensboro. Unfortunately, they lost to Clemson in it. I think it might have been 96. And someone like commented on it like, "When's the last time we had an alley-oop?" And it made me pause, and I was like, "That's a really good question. When is the last time we had an alley-oop dunk?" I mean, you know, I know I'm going into the weeds
Yeah.
here and
Well, and a lot of those would come off of transition, as you're saying, is, we 2-on-1 or whatever, and, we're throwing it up to Antoine Jameson or Vince Carter or, like, I mean, that's one team, but you can go through the years of just us. I mean, you think even Roy Williams, the out of bounds play where we'd always have that alley-oop right at the rim when it's, when we
we
had
ran it
1 second
near the
left
end
on
of
the
the
shot clock
season
or
like Leaky. That was the play where Leaky,
where they
uh,
tried, yep.
yeah, he tried to run it, and I think he ended up like missing a layup and then getting his own rebound and ended up kind of working out so that we ran more clock or whatever. But
Yep.
oh man,
Yep. And I think Jay Billis kinda said it today. He's like, "You have to try to speed up Virginia as hard as it is, but even in the half court, just running your plays and your sets with urgency, not just kinda going through and passing." And, we definitely weren't an efficient enough team, or even a good enough team in our half court to settle for that. Uh, just think of how many points that we would get even off of made baskets when we would run. Um,
yeah, this team really struggled to offensive rebound, and when they did offensive rebound, they didn't convert second chance points, which is a staple of Carolina basketball in seasons past. So it just that's what I'm saying. It didn't
yeah,
feel like Carolina basketball this year, not just because of the outcome, but some of the like principles. It's interesting. And I don't know if this simplifies it too much, but the quote from Armando Baycott, about just kind of the whole season felt like a hangover from last year, and maybe that simplifies it too much, but I feel like that does in a lot of ways sum it up. It's just like this hangover from that run, and that run was something magical. It's a shame we came up 3 points short, but this season just never materialized, and I think a lot of Tar Heel Nation in some ways is like taking a sigh, like a deep breath, and like, okay, let's hit the reset button, figure this out. Going to be an
yep, and
interesting off season.
it definitely will. And yeah, we probably need to jump forward in our conversation a little bit here. But I know in the last podcast I kind of said that too. Is that's part of why I want to see kind of a roster reset last year. I know Caleb and RJ and Mondo and all can come back, and especially after tonight. You'd think, you're welcome RJ back. I think Mondo, the way he does, you welcome him back. But even those guys, I'm gonna kind of include is just a reset and almost to kind of just see what kind of coach Hubert is because he's only coached this group. See if it is this group kind of holding him back from pushing on it or getting out in transition, pushing the ball up the court. Is it you know the way we defend? Is it because of the players we have? He feels like that's the best for these guys, or is this going to be kind of his style going forward? And we have to have the right guys in the right position to be successful. Obviously, I don't think the only difference between last year and this year is Manic, and that's been a big talking point as well. But he was like that perfect spot for Manic, and I know somebody had a comment that said the difference from last year to this year was a roster change, and we didn't have that this year. But again, I think once we got Manic in that spot, he was just kind of the perfect, and maybe that was kind of the just the crazy personality that that Brady was, that got this team to have fun last year, and to all those things we talked about, get in the right mood, and whatever it may be. I don't know, but so we did get a couple of answers to our NIT question. Should we accept an NIT invitation? So the Nintendo nerd says, I don't want them to accept an NIT invitation. Just put us out of our misery. And then I know I saw another one down here. Louis Moore says, if we don't play in the NIT, I think it would show our arrogance. So people going both ways. Before we started, I quickly kind of threw this question at you, and also a response that I'd seen on Twitter is, could we go into the NIT and play a bunch of our bench, and let Jalen Washington and Seth Tremble and Styles and Dunn and all those guys get a bunch of minutes, and uh, just get some experience before next year. But obviously that brings us into what Tar Heel fans have wanted or tried to stay away from, but have been talking about probably for a month or so now, is what the roster looks like next year. Do some of those guys transfer out? Obviously, do the starters kind of move on? Do they come back? I don't know that we need to get into that stuff tonight, but I don't know. Would you watch the Tar Heels in the NIT if they went, or like what would you want them to accept, or what would you want to see if they do? Would you want to see just the bench guys go out and do it? I mean, I don't know. How do
I'm usually here for Carolina basketball in whatever capacity.
we're still
Feed
here
it
at
to
this
me.
point, right?
Inject it in my veins usually, but with this team, yeah, I don't know. There's maybe a little reluctance. I mean, I watched them the year, I forget what year that was Roy's first year or something. I don't know when they were in the NIT that year, and they made it and lost to Dayton in the finals. I mean,
I
I
think
watched
that
them
was
in the NIT.
2010, right? Right after the his or
Okay,
his second champion. Yeah, because after the first one, they expected us to be bad, but Tyler had came in, so I think it was after Tyler graduated his championship.
okay, yeah. I watched them then. This team, yeah, I mean, they haven't been that much fun to watch for the most part. That Boston College game was something different. Interesting that we have come in to like the last four ACC tournaments and played a really dominant first game, and then have followed that up a few times with not such a great performance, which was the case unfortunately tonight. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there is an argument that could be made about it's an opportunity to get more games, kind of like college football teams use the practice time and the game time for bowls and the bowl season for that. I guess there's some value there. It'll be interesting to see the perspective that, the program takes, the coach takes, and the players feed off of that. I don't know. I mean, Baycott is definitely hobbled, and that could sway, you know, opinion and or decision making potentially.
Yeah, so I found a couple more 300 says I think we should go. I think we can go all the way to MSG, Wing Chi meditation. If I got that right. Says, yeah, why not play in the NIT and win that championship carried over to next year? It would be, as you were kind of talking about that, I was just thinking of like what would Hubert Davis's explanation be as if why they accept it, and then like like we're not gonna play Armando. Obviously, that one would be kind of easy. We're gonna let him heal from his ankle and stuff. But like if you were like, hey, we're just gonna get bench guys, take that bowl game uh, um, way of thinking about it, and hey, we're gonna play bench guys and get them a bunch of minutes and stuff. Like I'm just interested how he would explain that in the press conference to the media, because he hasn't always been straightforward in answering stuff post game or in press conferences. He's got his kind of way of saying what he wants to say, or getting around answering questions, which I think all coaches do. But um, it's interesting to kind of see him grow in that aspect of coaching. I don't think he's as I don't know as much as he came from ESPN. I don't think it's as smooth or hidden in the press conference sometime. Now that we've had these 2 seasons of, I guess you'd say, mediocrity for North Carolina basketball.
Yeah, well, I mean, what do you say if you pass it up? I mean, how do you
Yeah,
say that,
yeah,
I don't know, like, to me, I'm seeing some of these comments here that are like, take every opportunity to play and go out there and play with pride and energy. I mean, I'd like to see that for sure. Show me something else. There's a new season. Play free. I know it may feel like a consolation, but this is an opportunity to go out there and just, show somebody, even if you're transferring, even if you're moving on, like show someone in the gym, show someone nationwide what you got.
yeah. I mean, I think the easy way would be like, hey, we voted amongst the team, and the vote would be not to. But yeah, again, yeah, to explain that is like, hey, don't you like you're putting on that North Carolina uniform, have some pride and wear it with pride and yeah, if guys want to transfer out, obviously, yeah, it could be kind of their last moment of showing a team, what they can do and obviously in these days now too, it could be show all those sponsors or NIL, whatever they're called. I don't know if they're called sponsors if they get an NIL deal from them, but show the people that are willing to pay money like that you should be making some and um, I don't know. Yeah, that would be interesting too. We'll see. I don't know. I have no clue when you have to decide NIL stuff or not sorry, NIT stuff if you're going to accept that invitation or not. I think we lost Gil. There we go. He's back in.
Sorry, that was a slip of the finger.
Yeah, we know which finger that was. Do you have I mean I was just saying I have no idea when NIT invitation. I'm assuming I guess right after the
Yeah, I
brackets
suppose
are
right
announced,
after the
they
selection.
start inviting teams or letting teams decide if they're come in or not. So,
Just showing
um,
highlights of the game, unfortunately, right now. Can't even bear it. But hey, on a quick side note, I know that most people here are here for the men's team, but my wife and I this year have gotten into watching the women's team. They are definitely going to be in the NCAA tournament, so shout out to them. Hopefully, they earn a top four seed so they can host some games there in Carmichael. And they're a really fun team to watch. They got some great players, and Courtney Banghart's doing a great job with that program. So shout out to the women's team and give them all the love and support because we know that they're going to be playing for something here at the end of the season.
and they have another class coming in next year too, right? Pretty highly ranked class, I think, coming in next year. So, yeah, she's definitely got that on the right track. I have not seen a ton, but I always know kind of from Twitter and some group chats I'm in of when they're playing and how they're doing, and um, yeah, I don't know. Again, that's like you said, a totally side topic, but I just feel like it is really exciting or like just different having the 4 quarters that the ladies get to do. I'd like to see that. I think for the
I think
guys,
that, yeah, I mean, college basketball is the only men's basketball is the only form basketball that doesn't. I mean, maybe
only level.
only level. It's such a strange thing. You feel
Yeah,
like they will make a transition there at some point. It just seems inevitable. But after watching the women's games do it, I'm like, yeah, why not? You're not really losing anything. It's not drastically different, but it just is in alignment with the rest of every level of basketball.
right. Yep. Yeah. So Nintendo says he's hoping for a clean slate in terms of the starters next season. They had one miracle run, otherwise not much of a good team. Time to move on. I know Wing Chi meditation is kind of gets on us for getting after Hubert Davis and is putting most of the blame on the players. I know last podcast, and I've seen a couple of comments from already. This podcast is Hubert Davis is not the one going out there missing shots or turning the ball over and stuff. So, put you on the spot a little bit here, Gil, since you only show up once or twice a year now. But who would you put most of the blame on this season for? Does Hubert Davis get most of the blame for this season? Do the players get most of the blame? I mean, I think you have to say it's a combination of both, but to put the
I'm
pressure on.
Yeah, you are putting the pressure on, but in a way, I'm really glad you asked because I mean, it's an interesting thing, fan accountability. I think that people overall need to chill out and particularly be mindful of you feel like all this adrenaline and you say things on your, keyboard that you wouldn't say to people in real life. I mean, I think you need to be careful about that. I think it's a shared responsibility if I'm going to answer your question now in truth. And, everybody needs to look at themselves in the mirror and see what they can do better. I think that goes to the coaches, that goes to the players, it goes to everybody, that's part of that program is how can they get better? How can they improve? That was like a mantra last season is like, they felt like they hit rock bottom after double digit losses to Wake and Miami. And then they were just like, all right, let's go to work. Let's get better every day. And I assume that was the overall message, this season. Uh, but it's time to really roll up the sleeves and get that work done now. And I mean, we know it's going to be an interesting off season as to who returns, who doesn't. Uh, Regardless of when the season ends, whether they go to NIT or not or whatever, we know that there's seniors that aren't going to be back, and then we don't know what might happen with transfer portal wise. We know that they're definitely going to be active in the transfer portal and bring in players. I'm not sure right now off the top of my head who else is going to be coming in, but I'm not like blaming any one individual. I'm not blaming any one player, coach, etc. I think it's a shared responsibility. It was a, to be honest, it was a colossal failure. You know what I mean? The expectations were national championship or bust, and not to be the preseason number one and not to make it even to the NCAA tournament is the expectation. That's a failure. And so everybody has to look at it. Everybody has to see what can we do better? How can we improve every little thing about our processes? What that goes into practicing, that goes into player development, that goes into recruitment, transfer portal recruitment, etc. I mean, and the AD, everybody, like I think you got to see the coach continue to coach different players and for a couple more seasons. Don't be, drawn a quick reaction. I know this isn't a great comparison, but NC State and Pitt this year, both teams that have struggled in the ACC the last several seasons, but they held on to their coaches. And, Pitt did get blown out today, but overall, those two teams had a resurgence this year. And a lot of that was developed through, bringing players in through the transfer portal. So there you go. That's my long winded answer is, be a good fan and let things happen. But like, where is our role as accountability? Like, you can't let things, this was a failure. So it has to be addressed.
Yeah, and I think I saw a tweet from somebody had retweeted Joel Berry's, I think, and he kind of said it kind of along those lines of accountability. But it's not just I know a lot of people have gotten kind of on Coach Davis for keeping keep these players accountable and put guys on the bench and stuff. But he kind of said the accountability goes both ways from coach to player, but also players keeping other players accountable, coaches keeping players accountable, players keeping coaches accountable. Like it goes in both directions, and it's that's why you call it a team and you're a collective. Is everybody is everybody gets the blame or everybody gets the glory. It's and everybody needs to keep everybody accountable. And yeah, I I don't know if we'll ever find out kind of what went into this season. I think it was Jay Billis was talking about like the us being the number one team that never or first team that didn't make the tournament as the preseason number one. He said, obviously that expectation was a little bit lofty. From the season we had last year, obviously we were ranked by the run we had in March is where we earned that number one seed, and so maybe it was we were overhyped or overrated, whatever you want to call. But even if we weren't number one, we were probably, no matter what, going to be a top 10 preseason team. And even from that, to go from preseason top 10 to the season we had, would have been a disappointment. So, we probably will never know from the player's point of view or somebody within the program of kind of what they feel like went wrong this season. But again, we've said it on this podcast. We've kind of said it tonight. I don't think it's one thing. It's not one player. that probably happened. There's a lot of stuff that goes into a season like that, and yeah, like you said, kind of just a total failure. And so
And a
yeah,
big
there's
letdown for all of us. I mean, like, I'm everybody out there commenting. I know you are living and breathing and bleeding Tar Heel blue just like I am, and it's a letdown. We're all let down and frustrated, and just like Roy Williams used to say, that he has so much care in his little pinky. They're all let down and frustrated too. You know what I mean? They didn't want this to be the way that it was, and
right. Yeah,
unfortunately,
it's
it
not like the
was.
players are trying to have a season like this. They'd they'd much rather be in the tournament and having the fun that we see them during good games and stuff.
Yeah,
So
speaking of NIL money, you're gonna get so much more NIL money, being playing in that tournament.
right.
So, I mean, there's a lot of motivations, but
Yeah. So T Murray has a comment here talking about the expectation that was put on the program. Obviously, that comes with Carolina anyway, but we just talked about kind of the extra expectation for this team. But he says he hopes it lights a fire under Coach Davis. And again, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing Coach Davis coach a I say different rostered team, but not that I'm saying everybody on this roster needs to go. I think, again, to see different players playing besides the core of this team, the team that we've seen the last 2 years. Um, so Mike says, I've never seen a guy like Huber go through so many ups and downs in 2 years. Coaches with 20 years of experience go through that. It's crazy. But I think again that's part of the learning curve. I think a lot of us kind of forget this is still Hubert Davis' second year as a head coach, and he had 8 years on the bench with Roy, but um, as they always say, when you move over that one chair, there's a lot to learn and a lot that changes in your job description and stuff like that. And so we obviously have to remember that as well. So the Nintendo nerd was talking about if we go to the NIT, he says he's Tar Heel through and through and support them no matter what tournament they're playing in. 300 remembers when he was in the MSG with the Twins and Larry Drew playing in the NIT back in. I think that was 2010. I could have my years mixed up, but um, I believe that's right. Mike says they need to play in the games no matter what and experience. Yeah, I think you referenced that one earlier. Get any kind of experience. But T Murray kind of says if we go, he's probably not playing the bench even in the NIT. And Nintendo response says is probably still playing the starters 35 plus minutes. Um,
we haven't seen anything different, in 2 years.
I mean, It's exactly right. What kind of like why would we expect this team to win the ACC tournament this week? They haven't given us any reason to kind of expect that, and the same with Hubert here. We would hasn't given us anything to expect. Uh, he would play anything but the starters there. So 300 says, "Where did Gil go?" Oh, I think that was when you dropped out. Maybe I thought maybe he was giving you a hard time and not being here all
Oh,
season,
okay.
but I think it
Yeah,
was
see, I
probably
was
when
just
you're.
I was just trying to let him know that I thought he was like, where's he been?"
I
Yeah,
thought so too. That's why I highlighted it. But then I remembered it. I think it
and
was
then I was
probably when you.
commenting, "Well, I got a new job and I get up, like, really early." So that's why I haven't been here, but
All right, I mean, Gil, you are the attraction here tonight. You're what's changed, and we're up over 40 live viewers here right now. And so I'm just gonna everybody that's in here right now, go ahead and hit that like button on YouTube. If you are listening to this later and enjoying a better back and forth instead of just me hearing me read the comments and try to answer them, go ahead and leave those reviews or likes or hit Gil on Twitter at Yogi Gill on Twitter and tell him that he needs to get on the podcast more. Um, but obviously, we understand all of the. I hope everybody can understand when they go. It's not easy. There are games. I mean, there's weeks that I took off this year just because it was too tough, and I just didn't want to podcast at the point. And then there's other times to where life just gets in the way. So
yeah, it's not fun after these losses, man, but I feel like it's a therapy session for all of us.
it definitely is. Um, So here we got to end here soon. We're going. I don't want to go too long tonight, but Tom says only Davis has improved greatly since his freshman year. Obviously, that's been a hot topic too of player development and who's gotten better. Do you agree with him there? Is Davis the only person that's improved in the last 2, 3 years? I mean, the thing is, we see flashes. I think of Leaky. We had that 18.9 rebound game, whatever. It's like this is what we wanted, freshman or sophomore Leaky to look like. He had that tomahawk dunk against FSU, and we're like, that's the Leaky Black that we want. And I
This
think we've
team
seen. Oh, go
is
ahead.
con- this team is consistently inconsistent, and that pretty much is every player, including RJ. Although I think a lot of what was inconsistent about RJ this season was an injury. And I don't know how many of the players. I feel like Armando Bacot was never 100% this whole season. He rolled his ankle against UVA in Charlottesville, but even going into the season, I'm not sure how much he'd fully recovered from that ankle. I don't know. But I feel like injuries, not to make an excuse, affected individual players and the team as a whole. And it was just everybody was inconsistent.
Yeah, if we did one thing well this year, it was being consistent for sure. So I hope I say this name right, but Erdy, I can't even say it. Sorry, Mr. Jones here. Hopefully it's a guy, Mr. or Mrs. Jones. So it's the curse of Pete Nance. Northwestern never made the tournament with him, and now we're jinxed with him. But he does say, just joking at the end. Um, but and that wouldn't work either because Ryan Young went from Northwestern to Duke, and they're going to be um, in the tournament. And I mean, they looked good today. I think Pitt had a little bit of how well they looked today, but I told everybody before that last Duke game, Duke was playing really well and is going to be a formidable team. I don't necessarily expect them to go super far in the tournament, but um, I think they do have some upside there.
Yeah. Somebody commented about Brady Manick, and he was a pivotal player, obviously, but it was something about his energy and his fire that he brought to the court that I think helped the disparate parts and pieces that made up the core of this team gel together somehow, some way. I don't know what else to say about it, but obviously he was the perfect stretch four that helped this team with floor spacing and probably helped the guards do what they could do, slashing and cutting to the basket a lot better. We know that was a major issue for this team all season, and it's they were just like I don't know, a grinding offense that could never really get flowing, which was hard to watch.
Yeah. So Mike had an interesting comment here. He says, "Give Caleb some credit. He never misses games, takes the most criticism, and is still there. Will go and defend his teammates." There's truth in
He
that for sure.
Absolutely. He gets a ton of hate on social media, and man, I know from a couple of years ago, thinking about the players and how they see that, you know what I mean? And so be a good fan, and shot selection may not be his strong suit, but he comes hard, he comes to play. He's there for his teammates, and he wears the Tar Heel uniform, so that's all it takes for me to pull for him.
So 300 really quickly here. 300 is said if we have another season like this, Hubert will be on the chopping block. What is the minimum years that Hubert gets? Do you think?
Glad I'm not the AD making those decisions. I mean, yeah, it's everybody's going to be very impatient. And I mean everybody if we see a season like this again next year. So I really hope that's not the case. But I know that he's got a big time incoming class for 2024, and I feel like you got to give him like that much time. But obviously really hope we make the tournament next year. I mean, it's we can't fall out of, we want to be at the Kansas where Kansas is right now. That's where North Carolina to me should
Right.
hold that place, and we're not holding that place, and haven't really. After the 2017, it's been somewhat of a struggle to consistently be in the top 25 even, and that's not good enough. We all want it to be, we're expected to be a top seed in the NCAA tournament, and the players go out and they don't just expect that, but they play to earn that. That's what I want to see.
Yep. So
And
I said,
the coach does need to make that happen. Like he needs to instill that in his players. So I will be looking closely at that next year.
yeah. So I said, and again, I think I did caveat it that it's a new roster next year, not kind of our starters coming back because that kind of throws stuff off because we may end up the same team if everybody comes back next year. But um, with the caveat that we have kind of a fresh look next year with Hubert, I think that kind of shows us a little bit more about his coaching style, his coaching ability and stuff. And so I said after next year, if it were the same, we take a hard look at it. But like you said, with that 24 class coming in, you don't just fire a guy that's got one of the top classes coming in. As long as those guys are still signed and planning to come. Obviously, a lot can change and stuff changes really quickly now in college basketball. But I think if you have that class lined up, you have to go through 25. I was trying to remember. I heard somebody on some Carolina podcast is telling UNC fans to be patient because he's going to get at least. I think it was maybe Greg Barnes on Inside Carolina podcast that he's going to get at least 5 years, which would put us past 24. You know, I think what they would be sophomores going into junior years or something if we had 5 years. So I was just kind of
I
interested.
mean, that seems fair to me. You know what I mean? But the fan base is going to get impatient with what we perceive as the stubbornness to use the bench, which the problem with that is not seeing player development. We're used to seeing, we're accustomed to seeing players develop, and we haven't had an opportunity to see that. But part of that is because we don't even see the players get on the court.
Yep. All right, let's end it with this. I know you got to go, Gil. And so after you give your answer, if you want to hop off, you're more welcome. I'll wait for some people in the comments to maybe make their comment or their answers to this question. But who wins this year's championship? Who are you going to pick in your bracket without seeing the bracket right now? You don't see matchups,
Yeah, I
anything
mean,
like
this is
that.
early, but Kansas right now is for me the team to beat. I know Bill Self's having some sort of health issue that could have an impact, but for me, Kansas is the team to beat. They're the defending national champions, and someone's going to knock them off.
Yeah, unfortunately, unfortunately, that's about what I was going to say. Is I think right now they're, I mean, coming out of the top conference, having won that conference, they look like they're on their way to winning the conference tournament,
Yeah, I would say
and they're
Texas
just
looks.
rolling
I
right
haven't
now.
watched a lot of them. I haven't watched a lot of Texas, but I think Texas looks good enough to get out to the second weekend. But yeah, that's almost all I have now without looking at any brackets.
Yep. Well, I gonna say
It'll
you
be
say
interesting to see how
Texas.
the ACC does. You know,
It will. I mean, Miami looked pretty good today. They had a little bit of trouble, but I think they're our best bet of going deep for an ACC team. But I think UCLA just lost their best defender. Alabama, with all the I don't know turmoil and just distractions that they go through, and plus they rely on their shooting so much. You know, can they go or win it all? I think they can
I'll
go
be
deep,
pulling
but
against Alabama. I'll tell you that much.
but 300 agrees with us. He likes Kansas. Charles says Texas. So you guys can keep putting your answers in. You can reply to us on Twitter. But uh, we're not going anywhere. Nintendo says Oral Roberts is going to win it all. And obviously, he says he's just joking a little bit later. But yeah, appreciate everybody coming on. This is probably our highest viewership. Obviously, it's because it's not anybody that wants to talk about UNC basketball right now. But no podcast next week as I'm in Puerto Rico for the week. Hopefully, I'll come back and there's something worthwhile to podcast about. We'll talk about the brackets and upsets and all that stuff after the second or after the first weekend, after the second round. Hopefully, be back and podcasting some. We'll see if we can get Gil to join us again. But make sure you guys go like this video on YouTube, review or so at least subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, and keep it in your feed, and we'll keep bringing as much Tar Heel news as we can, and we'll talk some just college basketball as we get into the tournament because it looks like we have an NCAA tournament this year without the Tar Heels. Maybe we'll talk some NIT when we get back. Who knows? Who knows where
If
we'll
you
go?
if you need a team to pull for in NCAA, go Cougars, College of Charleston. That's my wife's alma mater.
And the Tar Heels beat them, so we can if they
Yeah.
all right, we are signing off. Gil, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate having you back. Obviously, they all enjoyed it as well. But until next time, go Heels.
Go Heels.